Give him the money.
No.
Jethro, do you realize if you go to prison, I'll go too, as an accessory before the fact?
Yes, I've taken that into consideration.
Then please, give Mr. Craig the money.
Why should I? It doesn't belong to him.
I'm getting so tired of playing games, Mr. Burke. Now, I'm going to give you exactly 5 minutes to give me that money, or I'm going to turn you over to the law. Now, Mrs. Burke's already told me the whole story.
Oh, she meant well, I'm sure. But she can't testify against me, even if the case ever does come to court.
You don't know what you're doing.
As a matter of fact, I know exactly what I'm doing.
5 minutes, Mr. Burke.
It's now exactly 5:55.
Then start counting. Because at 6 o'clock, I'm going to be forced to turn you and your wife over to the law. Our driver happens to be a deputy United States Marshal.
That's very interesting.
Then give me the money.
I've never been a man of violence, Mr. Craig, but I resent your attempts to intimidate me. Now, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to ask Mr. Perry to take me into custody, and at 6:30 or thereabout, I'm going to expose you as a murderer. I'd advise you to testify against him, my dear. That's legally permissible as long as you're not married to him. Although I'm beginning to suspect you should be.
Under 3 hours, still.
Take my advice, Simon. Never bet against this kid. I'm beginning to think it's nothing he won't do for money.
I know. That horse he rode will never be the same again.
Say, maybe I ought to be a Pony Express rider.
You know, that's not a bad idea. Of course, a profession like that takes a lot of practice, a lot of experience with horses.
It sure does.
Yeah, experience with all kinds of horses, even stage horses. Matter of fact, I was going to need watering before we hitch him up, and there's a good spot just through Frenchman's Pass.
Oh, wait a second.
And when you get there, you stay put till we come after you. There's nothing sadder than a lost Pony Express rider. Lucky you didn't break an axle.
Yeah.
Have any trouble?
Well, I'd hate to break a wheel every time I made a run, if that's what you mean.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant with your passengers.
Oh, I had a little run-in with one of them, not anything you could call trouble. How come you ask?
Hey, you got 3 of them, haven't you? A man named Burke, his young wife, and a younger fellow named Craig.
Hey, you've been here 5 minutes, and you already know more about my passengers than I do?
Well, Davy filled me in on it.
So what makes you think I got trouble?
Well, he told me he saw Craig kissing Mrs. Burke.
Well, she's a good-looking woman. I wouldn't mind kissing her myself.
Yeah, he also told me that her husband wasn't around at the time. And it wasn't the kind of a kiss he'd give a sister, if he had a sister.
I wonder why he didn't tell me.
Well, it seems you bet him $1 he couldn't get to halfway house and get me back here under 3 hours. He saw this wondrous sight on the way out and didn't want to stop and tell you.
And you hurried back just so he'd win the bet.
He told me he'd split it with me. An hour and a half interest in that $1 you just gave him. Come on, let's get this wheel on.
Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Craig.
Jethro, what are you going to do?
I'm going to turn myself over to the law. I can prove my innocence. Now, if you'd like to come along with me, my dear,
I still want the $5,000.
Go hang yourself, you doddering, penny-pinching fool. Go hang yourself, but you can't take me with you.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that, my dear. I wouldn't even want you to join me on the gallows. I'm sure you'd rather make that trip with Mr. Craig.
Jethro.
That ought to do it.
Mr. Perry?
Oh, Sam, Mr. Burke.
How do you do? I've been told you're a Deputy United States Marshal.
That's right, so is Mr. Kane.
Then I'd like to place myself in your custody.
For what?
As a fugitive from justice. I've just learned that I'm a wanted man. I've been accused of murder and arson. I would also like to place this $5,000 in your care, too. Of course, I'll want a receipt.
You said you didn't have any troubles?
All my life, I've lived by figures, Mr. Perry, so I must insist you count that money.
That's all right. We'd take your word for it.
Well, that's not good business. However, in that sheaf of money, you'll find a note to the effect that it was given to me as a bonus on the eve of my retirement after 30 years with the firm. You want to put the manacles on me?
Well, Sam, do you happen to have any manacles with you?
I know it's awful careless of me, but I just didn't happen to bring any along.
Then I'll give you my word of honor, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, we'll accept it.
Well, thank you, sir. Now, if you recall when we were raising the axle on this stage, I mentioned at the time that I was making an experiment. The time was just 5:57, and I can now say that I lit the candle at 3:23. According to my calculation, the candle should be just a stub by now. The candle's burned down in 2 hours and 54 minutes, give or take a little.
Well, what are you talking about? What candle?
The one out in the trees.
You mean you lit a candle in the timber?
Well, it was the only way I could prove my innocence.
Hey, Sam, take a look. He's got a real good candle going now.
You get that buckboard ready. I'll get Craig and Mrs. Burke.
Don't bother about the buckboard. Mrs. Burke and I will be the only one using it.
You mean you'd leave us in the middle of a fire?
That sums it up nicely. Now drop that gun belt. Slowly. I'll take that money belt.
You'll be lucky to live long enough to use it.
What do you mean by that?
Take a look. There's only one way out of here now. That's on foot to the river. That buckboard will never make it.
Maybe not, but the horse will. Unharness the horse.
Look, mister, if you want to commit suicide, you're on your own. We're heading for the river while there's still time.
Now, I told you I wanted that horse, and I mean it. Maybe you didn't hear me. Now, you get it. And make it fast. All right, come on, honey.
No. I'm staying with the others. You're not worth it.
But I got the money, remember?
That's not worth it either.
You walk away from me now, I'll kill you.
After what I've become the last few weeks, I think I'd welcome it.
All right. Where I'm going, girls like you are free of charge.
Can you make it, Luke?
It's worth a try. Let's go.
I'll lead the way. Don't stop for anything.